Welcome to Healthy Living, Happy Midlife, the podcast for women who are ready to reclaim energy, confidence, and joy in this powerful season of life. I'm Denise Stiegel, your host and menopause mentor. So, for 15 years, I've been helping women just like you navigate menopause, nourish your body with real food, and shift your mindset so you can live longer, but more importantly, live better. This show is about more than just managing symptoms, right? It's about rediscovering who you are, breaking free from self doubt, and creating a lifestyle that supports you physically, emotionally, and mentally. Together, we're going to explore strategies for balancing your hormones, boosting vitality, and embracing midlife with confidence and with ease. Some of the episodes will be educational, giving you actionable tips that you can use right away. Others, I'll bring in an expert voice and share inspiring stories that remind you that you're not alone on this journey. There are a lot of us on this journey, so you're never going to feel alone. Sometimes I'm going to take you behind the scenes of my own life and my work with my clients so you can see what is possible when you stop waiting and dealing with menopausal symptoms and actually start living again. So, if you're ready to move past frustration, fatigue, and the fear that comes in midlife and to step into the most vibrant version of yourself, welcome. You are in the right place. This is Healthy Living, Happy Midlife. So I'm ready to get started. How about you? Well, hello, and welcome back to the show, my friends. Today we are talking about something that affects millions of women, but still doesn't get the airtime it deserves. What am I talking about today? Hot flashes at work and how to handle them, losing your cool. I know I'm a comedian, aren't I? So picture this. You're in the middle of this huge presentation. You've prepped for it, you're ready. The room gets quiet, your team is listening, you're completely in the zone. And then, bam, it hits. That sudden wave of heat. Your cheeks start flushing, your heart starts racing like you just sprinted up a flight of stairs, and you start sweating profusely. So you take a sip of water, maybe you crack a joke or two. Guess it's heating up in here. And I'm not just talking about the project deadlines, but bump, and you keep going. Maybe it stops you in your tracks and you have to reel yourself back in and start over. Here's the thing though, when it comes to hot flashes, they're not just a passing inconvenience, right? They're really freaking annoying, right? They can disrupt your focus, derail your confidence, and over time impact your career in a huge way and truly in ways that most women have never even considered, especially since we haven't talked about this much, if at all, right? It's not something when we're in college, when we're taking those courses, when we're getting ready to, launch in our career, whatever it may be, we're in our 20s and 30s. We're not thinking what's going to happen, down the road. We're in our mid 40s, we're in our 50s. We're not thinking about how we're going to feel then, right? Because most of all, we don't talk about menopause. So this is why this is such an important conversation, because I want to get this out in the open. I want us to start talking about this more and more. I remember the winter. I live in Minnesota, so preface this here, okay, guys. I remember the winter when I first started experiencing hot flashes. I was working at Gift of Life Transplant House, which was one of my favorite jobs ever. And I worked with several nuns, most of them in their 70s and 80s. And one afternoon, I was sweating so much, it just did not stop, and I could not get comfortable. I took off my sweater, I opened a window, much to much to the dismay of my office mate, right? You can imagine. But when that didn't work, I went outside. It was minus 20 degrees. Yeah, that's cold. But I was so hot, I did not care. So Sister Jane Francis, who is one of my favorite, I can't say they were all my favorites. So Sister Jane Francis walked by and she asked me why I was standing in the freezing cold. So I told her. And she put a loving arm around me and said, "Ah, your first hot flash. They get worse before they get better." And I thought, what? Worse than this? What the heck have I got myself into? Like, what's going to happen next? If this is just the beginning, right? And this was truly the beginning of my menopause journey. And that was 17 years ago. Lucky me. So the thing is, menopause is starting to push women out of the workforce. Years ago, generation ago, this wasn't an issue because most women did not work. Not saying something that isn't true here, right? When I was, I guess when I was in eighth grade, that's when my mom went back to work or and she worked in the school system. So her schedule was pretty close to mine and my sister's, right? Most women a generation and a half ago, were mostly they worked at home, they were homemakers. Yes, of course, you had some teachers and nurses and people like that, thank goodness. Um, but even they didn't talk about it. Maybe retirement age for people then was different. I don't know. I didn't live then, right? But let's think about this. Hot flashes are really only the beginning, right? Menopausal symptoms um, can impact your sleep. We know that. Your concentration, your energy, your mood, all which affect your work performance, right? And then when our workplace is silent on this issue, like they don't know it exists, right? That isolation makes it even that much harder for us, right? It's embarrassing. We don't want to talk about it. It's private. Um, but here's what the numbers tell us, right? I like to look at the science behind it and the statistics behind this. So in the United States, 13% of women have quit their jobs due to menopausal symptoms. Another 15% have seriously considered it. Now, think about this. In this day and age, everything is so much more money. Things are not getting cheaper, they're getting more expensive, right? My generation, we've always had two incomes in a household. So this is really important information, right? 40% of women, obviously, who were surveyed, report that their symptoms significantly impacted their work. Remember those things that I said before, the energy, the mood, not sleeping, all of those impact our mood. Of course they do. They impact our ability to function at a high level, to think clearly, to make good decisions, right? Nearly one-third would consider moving from a full-time position to a part-time position, and another 22% consider retiring early. That's crazy. I mean, I think of my life and I think about never retiring because I love what I do. If you love what you do and you're going to retire early because of menopausal symptoms because you're not getting the support, it's a problem that we have in this day and age, right? And it doesn't just happen here in the United States. Globally, the medical clinic, no, the Mayo Clinic, which is just down the road from my house, by the way, Mayo Clinic estimates that menopause-related missed work days cost the United States businesses 1.8 billion, that's with a B, annually. That's a lot of money, right? So women are calling out. Maybe they're leaving early. This is a huge issue for companies and organizations, right? They don't want to lose money. So this is something that they really need to start paying attention to. In the United Kingdom, no, still talking about money here. In the United Kingdom, menopause-related exits, leaving the job, cost businesses 1.5 billion pounds each year. I have to figure out what that actually is in dollars. Could be about the same. So in the United Kingdom, they're having the same exact issue that we're having with women of menopausal age, this midlife issue, this midlife that we deal with. They're having the same challenges with women leaving jobs, either permanently going part-time or retiring early. So this is more than just a personal issue, right? This is a talent drain, right? companies are losing seasoned, experienced women at the peak of their expertise. Think about it. You're not an expert when you're 25 and you're right out of college, but by 45, yeah, you're at the top of your game, right? And you're still learning and you're still growing. And then all of a sudden, yes, hot flashes start to, get in the way and cause a little bit of an issue, and then maybe it gets worse. Granted, there are things that we can do to manage those, but for some women, symptoms are so severe, especially in the beginning, that they don't know how to manage them yet, right? And workforce not paying attention and not supporting us is just making the situation worse. So there is a book that I have. I thought I had it here on my desk. It's called Estrogen Matters. Now, I have the updated version of this book. And in the book, it tells the story of two female physicians in the United Kingdom. I love to talk about the United Kingdom and the United States because obviously I live in the United States, but my entire family lives in the UK, my extended family. So I think it's really it's fun to kind of compare what's going on across the pond. So one of these ladies, one of these physicians, now this is a doctor, right? Spent a lot of years in training. One of them loved her job so much, but she was too embarrassed to discuss her symptoms with her superiors or with anybody. So she struggled in silence until she actually couldn't manage it anymore. And she just resigned, like showed up at work one day and just quit her job. Now, yes, that was a bad thing for her. Um, Obviously, she was struggling. That was a really tough thing for the people she worked with, her partners, and all the people in her department, because now all of a sudden they have to pick up the slack and the patients that she's now not going to see. That's a challenge, right? So both sides, it was a challenge for her. Now it's a challenge for the business, right? And just the fact that there's such a huge stigma around menopause and menopausal symptoms in the workplace. Now, the other physician, she spoke to her superiors, but was met with complete indifference. All she wanted was to change her schedule a little bit. So eventually, she too left a job and a role that she absolutely excelled in. So there's a case of two talented female physicians who just gave up, just left their jobs because they were struggling with symptoms and they didn't get the support they needed at their job. So we know the experience each one of us has when it comes to menopause is very different, right? Menopause can start with it starts with perimenopause. We say the word menopause as like a general term, but it really is most of us are struggling with perimenopause. And then there's that menopause year that you don't actually know until 12 months after the last time you have a period, right? So your menopause day is the day after that 12-month anniversary. So really we're talking perimenopause. So what we experience, it's more than the hot flash, right? And menopause symptoms, they say, can last 4 to 8 years. Well, I started 17 years ago and I'm 3 years postmenopausal and I still have challenges, right? I know how to manage them. Know my diet and nutrition is a big part of it. My sleep is a big part of it. My exercise is a big part of it. Eat real food, make decisions, be accountable. If you've listened to me before, you've heard me say that pretty much at every podcast, right? But again, so for some people, they say in general 4 to 8 years, but for some people, yes, like me, even longer. And truly beyond the hot flash, there's the cognitive changes, the brain fog, the memory slips, difficulty concentrating. I had a client recently who didn't understand anything about perimenopause. Like she thought menopause, you hit menopause when you were 55 and that was it, right? She had been struggling with brain fog for 10 years before she understood that it was perimenopause that was actually causing the brain fog. And the most frustrating thing for her is that there's things that she could have done in those 10 years to alleviate most of those symptoms. The second thing, sleep disruption, right? How many times does a hot flash wake you up at night? Are you just waking up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and staring at the ceiling? This happens a lot to women. Um, What does this lead to? It leads to fatigue, of course, if you're not sleeping, irritability, mood swings, and reduced productivity. The reduced productivity piece is the part that your company and your bosses is most concerned about, right? They're not really concerned that you're tired. Um, they don't understand the reason for your fatigue or for your reduced productivity. Um, so again, this is why I'm having this conversation. And this is exciting because this is a precursor to another conversation I'm going to have later this month. This similar topic, but actually to on a podcast that is specifically for businesses. So I'm really excited about this. Now, of course, there's the physical discomforts, joint pain, headaches, joint pain and headaches. Some of the other weird things too, like itchy scalp, itchy skin, like just strange things that nobody realizes is part of when your estrogen decreases in perimenopause and through menopause. Estrogen has over or performs over 400 tasks in our body. So yes, of course, if we're losing that, there are a lot of things that are going kind of haywire in our body that estrogen or that lack of estrogen really is causing. We know there's cardiovascular risk to lower estrogen. We also know that there is osteoporosis risk. So these are things that, again, we need as women in this stage of life, we need to understand what's going on, how we can help ourselves so we can then have these conversations with our bosses, with our employers, with our coworkers. It's really, really important. And then, of course, mood changes, anxiety, depression, and loss of confidence. Anxiety and depression tend to increase, again, with the loss of estrogen and progesterone. But the challenge there is when you present this to your doctor, more often than not, they want to give you an antidepressant, which is not necessarily going to, unless, of course, it's clinical depression. But if it's anxiety and depression because of the drop in hormones, that's not going to address the problem. So, those mood changes and the depression and anxiety absolutely lead to a loss of confidence. Confidence in the way you look, confidence in the way you feel, the way you present yourself. And of course, if you're tired and you don't look great and you go to work and you look tired, obviously there's a lack of confidence there that is evident when you walk in and people are looking at you like, oh, she looks like she had a rough night, right? Been through some of those nights, not recently, but definitely through some of those nights. So when symptoms aren't recognized or supported, they can absolutely erode your performance, attendance, and this is a kicker, advancement opportunities in your career, right? If you're showing up and you're tired, if you're not thinking clearly, even though you're qualified and you are brilliant at what you do, if you're not perceived that way now, that promotion that you've been eyeing may not go to you. It may go to somebody younger, may go to somebody who's not struggling, may go to another man or go to a man. This is really a challenge. I think to me, this is one of the biggest challenges that women are facing is, we talk about that, that ceiling, whether it's pay scale or advancement, we're hitting a ceiling and this ceiling seems to be around the menopause years. So what can we do? What can companies do, right? Practical steps to keep midlife talent, right? Forward-thinking organizations are really beginning to address menopause in the workplace here. Similar to policies for pregnancy, right, and maternity leave. They're starting to think, okay, well, this is a different phase in women's lives. I mean, we know that there are companies that offer paternity leave for when, the man in the family, when there's a child, that he can get an opportunity to be home and connect and bond with their newborn child. So one of the things, creating a menopause policy really is important. It signals that support is part of the company culture, right? And it's interesting that our younger generation less and less want to work for corporations. Well, corporations still exist, right? And there are going to be people who work there. Um, if they're forward thinking when it comes to menopause and a menopause program or policy, sorry, they're definitely going to have better qualified women in those positions. I think it's important to train managers, right? Awareness and empathy always prevent misunderstanding and bias. And of course, bias is a huge issue throughout all companies, right? And it's not just about against women; it's against men. It's about you name it, the list of things. I'm not going to go there, right? Offer flexible options, right? Remote working. So many of us are doing that now, right? I don't necessarily think it's a great thing 100% of the time because you do need that social aspect of working with someone. But remote work, adjusting some hours, um, menopause specific leave. If somebody is really struggling with something and need to learn how to manage that, you know, give that person an opportunity to figure out what's going on, see their doctor, see their coach, and really figure out what is going to work for them moving forward. Provide health resources, right? Access to specialists, employee assistance programs, wellness workshops. I don't know how many times companies will say, typically here locally, they're smaller companies, but they want to have a wellness workshop. And I've been talking more and more about menopause in the workplace. And this is something that is new to most businesses. And then, of course, the easy things, adjust the environment, fans, temperature control, breathable uniforms. I remember last year, little strange that I'm going to talk about this, but I remember last year the baseball players were complaining, like the professional baseball players were complaining about their uniforms because of the material it was made of. It was hot, it was itchy, and kind of giggle a little bit, but yeah, if you have to wear a uniform at work, that can be really easy because you don't know. It can be easy because you don't have to think about what you're going to wear to work. But if it's uncomfortable and it's the material isn't breathable and you're hot all the time, on top of being hot all the time, that's not a good thing. So this is an easy fix, an easy way to support people. Of course, having quiet zones. Like sometimes in an office, you just need to step away. It's one thing if you have your own office, you can just close the door. But for many people, in a lot of corporations and a lot of companies, the cubicle thing is still real, right? And you need to kind of find a place to just be quiet where the phones aren't ringing and people aren't talking and all of the noise, that hustle and bustle of an office. So those are simple things. And truly, I think for me, one of the most important and really foundational pieces of this is to normalize the conversation, right? Company-wide education will break stigma and encourages openness, right? If your coworkers don't know what's going on, they can't help you, they can't support you, right? On the flip side, if the company has no idea what's really, that this is an issue, um, this conversation will absolutely help. And there are some forward-thinking companies, Genentech, Adobe, NVIDIA, Bank of America, BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb, are already leading in menopausal benefits, from medical consultations to dedicated support groups. Like, I don't work for any of these companies, but this is looking at the research. These are companies that are popping up when it comes to supporting women and really being in the forefront of this conversation. Of course, for ladies, ladies, when we need some practical strategies too. This is great, having this conversation and putting these things in place, or at least trying to, take that first step and have the conversation is so important. But what do you do right this minute, right? Okay, Denise, that's great, but I'm having challenges right this minute. How do you help me? So while we work towards systemic change, here are some tools you can use today, right now, right this minute, if you need to, right? Dress in layers that can be removed discreetly. I think this is important. If you have a sweater, maybe you have a suit jacket, take that off. And sometimes, like, I like to wear a scarf, but scarves are easy to get rid of too, right? They're basically a fashion tool, but they're easy to get rid of if you need to. Keep a small fan at your desk. They actually have fans that like have USB that will go into your computer, or just have a small one. I actually have one that's about this size, that actually it's not at my desk, but it's at my bed, because occasionally I do struggle at night with some hot flashes. It's not often, but it's often enough or frequent enough that I need that fan there. Because there are just some nights that it's hot, especially in the summertime, even with air conditioner on. Because then, of course, there's the opposite. You have your hot flash and you're sweating and you're like, oh my God, it's so hot. And then as soon as the hot flash goes away, you're freezing cold because the air conditioner's on, right? So this is an important one. Sip water steadily through the day, and that's going to regulate your temperature, right? You don't want to just kind of like guzzle water, like, oh God, I'm going to guzzle the water because I'm dying. You don't really want to do that. Um, One, it looks kind of strange, like, what is she doing? That's really not the way your body likes to drink water, right? And then, of course, as you're having a hot flash, practice slow, deep breathing during the flare up, right? Whenever you're having a hot flash, if you go, oh God, oh God, oh God, it just makes it worse. So just some deep breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth a few times, and it'll go away. And most hot flashes like come and go in 30 seconds, right? Occasionally longer. Um, and you can breathe, just for 30 seconds, you can just stop and breathe without it looking weird. You don't want to be like, hold on, I got to take my deep breathing now. No, you don't want to do that, but just gently. You could be doing this at your desk. You could even do this in the middle of a meeting. You could just quietly sit there and breathe. Now, if you're talking, that might be a little more difficult, but um, thinking about it will help also. Um, I think it's always, always, always important to track symptoms and triggers, and then adjust what's going on, right? If you love spicy food and you have spicy food for lunch every day, and then you notice in the afternoons you're like having a hot flash after hot flash, let's not have the spicy food, um, and or dampen the amount of heat in your food. um, and then, I always kind of think, create that personal cool zone. Obviously, I mentioned having a fan at your desk, but there are also these cloths that stay cool. And so, or you wet them, you wring them out, and they stay cool. Keep that at your desk, right? And this way, one time you get warm, you just dab yourself and be done with it, right? So the big takeaway here is menopause is not the end of a career, right? It can actually be the reboot that you didn't know you need, right? But only if the workforce evolves. So we do need to work on that. You need to evolve too, right? I guess we are evolving through perimenopause, menopause to postmenopause. We need to really understand what's going on in our body, what we can do to manage symptoms. And that's what I'm here for. That's what I do. Like I said, I've had 17 years of personal menopause experience. Yay me. Plus the education and the training. So much of my background in nutrition fills the gaps when it comes to challenges with menopause, right? Many of us haven't been eating the best for maybe 10, 20, even 30 years, right? When we were in college, we could eat anything. We could eat pizza every night, right? Not the healthiest thing, but by now that's actually starting to catch up with us. It's creating inflammation. Inflammation triggers all sorts of negative things in our body. Um, estrogen, drop of estrogen increases inflammation, and all of this, of course, messes up with our cortisol. Now we're not sleeping, and the cycle goes. So if you're struggling, please give me a call. Let's at least talk about what you have going on, and we can move forward. So this conversation really isn't just I hate to say that, it's not just about personal comfort. It's about more than personal comfort. It really is about keeping brilliant, experienced women like you and me in leadership, in innovation, in mentorship roles. So, so important. I had a mentor when I was, oh gosh, my second job out of college. I was working for Starwood Hotels in Philadelphia, and I had a great mentor. She pointed me in such a good direction. Um, dissuaded me when I was possibly taking a bad direction, and was really somebody who supported me in that early phase of my career. So so important that we have um, female mentors. It's also about recognizing that when we are supported, when women are supported through midlife transitions, right? Everyone wins, right? Our productivity rises, not just our productivity, but the productivity of the people around us, like even in our home, our family, our work, our community events that we do, right? Retention improves. I mentioned before the cost that Mayo Clinic says it costs companies $1.8 billion. Um, people either leaving their job or calling out, right? And truly, it strengthens company culture. And what's so important to companies, they talk about it. A lot of them talk a good story, company culture, we're great here. But if they're not, if they're saying that and not, putting their money where their mouth is, then they're really not worth the time and effort you put into with them. So truly, if you are a woman navigating menopause at work, you absolutely are not alone, right? If you're a leader or business owner, this is your opportunity to lead with empathy and keep your people thriving. Now, if you're a female leader and entrepreneur, you kind of get what's going on. And really, you can take this bull by the horns and run with it, right? I like that. So let's build workplaces where menopause is acknowledged. It doesn't have to be like an everyday conversation, but we do need to acknowledge that we do have um, people that work for our companies that are struggling with menopause, right? It needs to be supported, normalized, not just the whispers. Because if we just keep whispering, we're never going to get heard. We're never going to have change. So I'd love to hear your stories. Share them with me. Um, Comment in YouTube or wherever you're listening to this, send me a comment. Because the more we talk about this, the less power this stigma that of menopause has over us. And truly, if you're ready to create strategies for yourself for navigating this chapter, then let's please talk, because together we can thrive in midlife and menopause. No sweat. All right, everyone, I'll see you next week. Have a great time. I will see you. Healthy living, happy midlife. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Healthy Living, Happy Midlife. My hope is that today's conversation left you inspired, encouraged, and ready to take the next step toward creating a vibrant, fulfilling life that you deserve. Remember, you don't have to settle for fatigue, brain fog, or frustration. Midlife is not the end of your story. It's the doorway to your next best chapter. And I'm here to help you walk through it with energy, with confidence, and with joy. So if you're ready to take this journey further, I invite you to schedule a free strategy call with me. The link is in the show notes. And together we'll design a plan that works for you at this time in your life, for your body. So be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. Catch the video version on YouTube so you never miss another episode. Share it with a friend who needs to hear that midlife can truly be the most powerful season of her life. Until next time, I'm Denise Stigall, reminding you that healthy living, happy midlife is just possible. It's yours for the